Picture this, it's 2011, a 23-year-old kid just became the youngest UFC champion ever. Fast forward to 2021, he's being inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. Sounds like a fairy tale, right? Now imagine that same night, that Hall of Famer is arrested for domestic violence. This isn't fiction, this is the real life story of Jon Jones, and it's wilder than any fight inside the octagon.
So when people say they f with it, it's like they f with me, and that feels cool.
2008, a lanky 21-year-old steps into the UFC octagon for the first time. Jon Jones, fresh-faced and inexperienced, doesn't look like much, but something's different about this kid. Jones faces seasoned veterans with years of experience under their belts. On paper, he shouldn't stand a chance. These guys have been in wars, honing their skills through countless battles. But then the fight starts and jaws drop. Jones isn't just holding his own, he's dismantling these veterans with moves they've never seen before. Spinning elbows that come out of nowhere, oblique kicks that destroy knees. It's like he's playing a different game entirely. Behind the scenes, training footage reveals the truth. Jones is obsessed. He's up at 4 AM pounding the pavement while the rest of the world sleeps. In the gym, he's drilling these unorthodox techniques over and over. When others call it a day, Jones is still there, perfecting his craft. His legendary coach, Greg Jackson, can hardly believe what he's seeing. The climb continues. Jones racks up win after win, each more impressive than the last. Veteran fighters, champions from other organizations, they all fall to his innovative style. The MMA world watches in awe as this kid rewrites the rulebook fight after fight. Then comes the moment that cements his place in history. At just 23 years old, Jones steps into the cage to face Mauricio Shogun Rua, a legend of the sport, who has been fighting since Jones was in grade school. He's a former Pride Grand Prix champion, a man who's been in wars with the best of the best. But on this night, Rua looks lost. Jones dominates from the opening bell, using his freakish reach and unorthodox attacks to keep the champion off balance. In the third round, it's over. Jones finishes Rua with a brutal combination, becoming the youngest UFC champion ever. But as Jones wraps that championship belt around his waist, little does he know that a new set of pressures is about to emerge. The spotlight is about to get a whole lot brighter, and with it comes temptations and challenges he's never faced before. The question now is, can the Prodigy handle the weight of the crown? Suddenly, Jones finds himself thrust into a whirlwind of fame, money, and temptation. The quiet gym days are replaced by red carpet events and VIP parties. Everyone wants a piece of the young champ. It's intoxicating and Jones is drinking it all in. But as the parties get wilder, Jones's training starts to suffer. Late nights turn into missed morning sessions. His coaches notice, but Jones brushes off their concerns. He's on top of the world. Who's gonna stop him? Inside the cage, Jones is still unstoppable. He continues to dominate his opponents, using his unorthodox style to confound challengers. But outside, cracks are starting to show. A DUI arrest here, missed obligations there. The MMA world starts to whisper. Is the young champ losing control? His team tries to rein him in. They see the danger signs, the potential for it all to come crashing down. But Jones isn't listening. He feels invincible. The victories keep coming, and in his mind, this justifies everything. In January 2015, just days after being featured on Forbes 30 Under 30 list, Jones tests positive for cocaine metabolites. It's a bombshell that rocks the MMA world. Jones checks into rehab, but it's just a token gesture as he leaves after just one night. His coach, Greg Jackson, expresses growing concern. The pressures of fame is clearly affecting Jones's focus and dedication, but the champ isn't hearing it. He's too caught up in the lifestyle, the adoration, the feeling that he can do no wrong. Inside the gym, when he does show up, Jones remains a force of nature. His skills are sharper than ever. Outside those walls, he's spiraling. The party never stops, and Jones doesn't want it to. Years later, reflecting on this period, he admitted the truth.
Really embarrassing situation, and I had to explain to so many people that I'm not a cocaine addict by any means, or not even a frequent user. I just made a really dumb decision. Just really got caught with my pants down in this whole situation.
The collision course was set. Jones is racing towards a cliff at full speed, and he either can't see it or doesn't care. The question isn't if he'll crash, but when, and how spectacular the wreck will be. In April 2015, the answer comes. Jones is involved in a hit-and-run incident that leaves a pregnant woman injured. It's the wake-up call everyone's been dreading. The UFC strips him of his title and suspends him indefinitely. In the aftermath, a sober Jones takes to social media. Got a lot of soul-searching to do. Sorry to everyone I've let down. But is it too little, too late? The Prodigy who rewrote the rules of MMA now faces his toughest opponent yet. Whilst Jones grappled battled with his inner demons, a new challenger emerged, one who saw through the cracks of his carefully crafted image. Daniel Cormier wasn't just another opponent, he was a mirror reflecting the ugly truth Jones tried to hide. How would the troubled champ react when faced with someone who refused to buy into his act? Cormier, Olympic wrestler, undefeated heavyweight, and a man with zero tolerance for Jones's antics. DC didn't mince words when he called out the champion.
John Jones, you can't run away from me forever. I'm the kid at the wrestling tournament that is always in your bracket. No matter where you go, boy, I'm coming. You better hurry because I'm getting better.
Each accusation was like a jab to Jones's carefully constructed public persona. The rivalry ignited like gas on a fire. Jones, usually so cool and collected, started showing cracks in his armor. His trademark smirk gave way to flashes of genuine anger. Cormier had struck a nerve and everyone could see it. Behind closed doors, Jones became obsessed with Cormier. He couldn't stand being called out, being seen for who he really was. The need to prove Cormier wrong consumed him. In interviews, Jones tried to maintain his composure, but the mask was slipping. As their first fight approached, Jones trained like a man possessed. He pushed himself harder than ever before, often putting in multiple sessions a day. This wasn't just about defending his title anymore, it was about silencing Cormier, about proving to the world, and maybe to himself, that he was everything he claimed to be. The tension reached a boiling point during a promotional event for UFC 178. What started as the usual trash talk quickly escalated. Jones pressed his forehead against Cormier's and suddenly fists were flying. Cormier shoved Jones by the throat and security had to separate them. The incident cost Jones 50,000 in fines and 40 hours of community service, but the psychological damage was already done. When they finally met in the octagon at UFC 182, Jones dominated. He used his reach, his unorthodox style, and his sheer determination to outpoint Cormier over 5 grueling rounds. On paper, it was a clear victory for the champion, but something felt off. The win felt hollow. Cormier pushed Jones to his limits, both mentally and physically. The rivalry between Jones and Cormier was far from over. It would simmer for years, each man pushing the other to new heights and new lows. But as Jones celebrated his victory, he had no idea that an even greater threat to his reign was looming on the horizon. The demons he'd been fighting outside the cage were about to come knocking, and this time, no amount of skill or training could save him from himself. For a while, it seems like the prodigal son had learned his lesson. Jones returns to the cage with a fire in his eyes, reclaiming his title in dominant fashion. Fans and pundits alike breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe this was the wake-up call he needed. Maybe the Jon Jones redemption story is back on track. But old habits die hard, and for Jones, they came roaring back with a vengeance. Failed drug tests start piling up, and another DUI arrest hits the headlines. It's like watching a car crash in slow motion, and the MMA world can't look away. How can someone so talented, so gifted, keep finding new ways to self-destruct? His legacy, once seemingly invincible, now lies in tatters. The aftermath is brutal. Jones pleads guilty to leaving the scene of an accident, but the spiral isn't over. In March 2016, barely a year after the hit and run, Jones lands back in jail for violating his probation. This time, it's drag racing charges. The court orders him to take anger management and driver improvement classes. It's a humbling moment for a man who once seemed untouchable. Just when it seemed like Jones might be getting his act together, another bombshell drops. He's pulled from UFC 200 due to a potential doping violation. The tests come back positive for banned substances clomiphene and letrozole. USADA hands down a 1-year suspension. It's another crushing blow to a career that once seemed destined for GOAT status. Whilst the world watched Jon's external battles, a war raged within. Ever wonder why some of the most talented people seem hellbent on destroying themselves? Jon Jones might be the perfect case study. Let's dive into Jones's mind. Psychologists would have a field day with this guy. Jones hit the big time young, at 23 years old, UFC champ, wild at his feet. That kind of success, it messes with your head, makes you feel untouchable, invincible even. But here's where it gets tricky. Jones grew up in a religious household, so you've got this clash going on in his head. On one side, there's the I can do anything champion mentality, but on the other, the ingrained sense of right and wrong. Now, throw in some narcissism and impulsivity. Experts point to these traits in Jones's behavior, and it's not hard to see why. The guy's constantly testing himself, pushing new boundaries. In the cage, that's gold, but outside, it's a recipe for disaster. Think about it. Jones is addicted to challenge. He's wired to prove that he is the best. But when you've beaten everyone in the octagon, where do you go? For Jones, it seems like he turned the need to test himself towards risky behavior, drugs, alcohol, reckless driving. It's like he's daring the world to stop him. Then there's the substance abuse. Jones started drinking in college to deal with anxiety. He admitted it wasn't healthy, but as his fame grew, so did his reliance on substances. It's a classic case of using external stuff to numb internal pain. Jones once said he feels like a bad guy trying to be good, and that shows that he's wrestling with his identity, trying to figure out who he really is. Is he the Christian boy from upstate New York, or the wild child of the UFC? Maybe he's both, and that's the problem. 3 years, that's how long Jon Jones vanished from the MMA world. When he finally returned in 2023, fans were wondering if we would see the unstoppable force of old, or had time and trouble finally caught up with a controversial champ. As it turns out, Jones had one more twist up his sleeve. March 4th, 2023, UFC 285. Jones steps in the octagon to face Cyril Gane for the vacant heavyweight title. The skeptics are out in force. Can Jones still compete at the highest level? Has he finally gotten his life together? It took just 2 minutes and 4 seconds to answer those questions. Jones submits Gane with a guillotine choke, becoming the new heavyweight champ. It's a masterclass, a reminder of why many consider Jones the greatest of all time. In the aftermath, he seemed different, talking about his faith and quoting scripture. He talks about personal battles overcome, about finding strength in his relationship with God. For a moment, it feels like maybe, just maybe, the prodigal son had finally come home. But has he really changed, or is this just another act in the long-running Jon Jones drama? The truth is, Jones' legacy is complicated. Inside the cage, he's revolutionized the sport. His innovative striking, his ability to adapt mid-fight, his sheer physical gifts, they've changed what we thought was possible in MMA. He's the youngest champion in UFC history, a 2-division title holder with a record that speaks for itself. But outside the cage, that's where things get messy. The failed drug test, the legal troubles, the constant sense that Jones is his own worst enemy. It's all part of the package. Every time Jon Jones steps into the octagon, he's not just fighting his opponent, he's fighting against his own history, against the skeptics who wonder when the other shoe will drop. As Jones prepares for what might be the twilight of his career, the questions remain. Can he stay out of trouble long enough to secure his place in history? Will his actions finally match his words? Or is this just another cycle, destined to end in disappointment? One thing's for sure, the Jon Jones story is far from over, and whether it ends in redemption or relapse, it will be one hell of a final chapter.